Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day, and the families demanding answers. We reveal the shocking evidence as it was uncovered by investigators in their quest for justice. Tonight, a Toronto teenager killed at school, the first murder of its kind in the city's history.
I tried to help him.
They got into the school with the gun. Who helped them bring in the gun?
Post Jordan, there's been a couple hundred homicides of school-age kids. So there's something fundamentally wrong in particular communities.
It was some artificial sense of security, a bubble that had finally been burst.
Please don't let my son die in vain.
And now, here's Crime Beat reporter Catherine McDonald with the legacy of Jordan Manners.
May 23rd, it was a Wednesday. Normally he will say he was leaving. That morning he didn't say anything. He left. That was it.
Jordan is 15 years old and in grade 9. It is his first year at C.W. Jeffries Collegiate Institute.
Was it hard to believe your baby was going off to high school?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Felt like I was getting old. Getting old.
Jordan's mom, Lorraine, says he was into basketball, music, and girls.
So did he like it there? Was he fitting in?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. He was fitting in. Because I visited the school just to make sure that everything was okay. And from what they told me, he was okay. So I wasn't worried about anything.
So the reputation of Jeffries was that it was a really good school.
School, yeah.
And a safe school.
Yeah.
And versus other schools in the neighborhood that maybe weren't as good.
Yeah.
So you picked that school for those reasons.
Yeah. And I kind of blame myself for sending him there. Maybe if I hadn't sent him there, he might have still been alive.
That Wednesday morning, Jordan heads off to school. It is the last time his mother sees him alive.
I was right there.
What did you see?
Nothing. Just seen him fading away in front of me. I tried to help him.
Was he conscious, to your knowledge?
His eyes are open, but he was shaking.
And were you trying to talk to him or give him CPR
Yeah.
or what were you doing?
No, I was trying to talk to him. I'm like, Jordan, don't die. I'm like, just stay awake. Glory and help's coming.
Jordan was discovered lying in a school stairwell.
I was putting in an air conditioner in the house with my son and my nephew when we got the call.
Do you remember what they said to you?
The young lady said, Lorraine, Jordan got shot and I said, what? She goes, Jordan got shot.
Members of the emergency task force surround C.W. Jeffries High School. Officers are on high alert. They've been told there could be a gunman still roaming around inside.
Dozens of police officers surround C.W. Jeffries. 600 students are locked down.
I have officers on every floor and in every room.
Word begins to spread through the neighborhood that a student has been shot.
They're in the library. They're in the other side of the school.
I was thinking that it could be my son. I'm very worried. I need to see my son.
Lorraine is living a parent's nightmare. She's desperate to see her son.
Nobody knew what hospital he was at. They just took me to Finch Hospital and just left me there, the principal, and I had to flag down. It was one of the nurses, they found out where he was at, and then I had to flag down a police from 31 Division to take me up to the school.
She was hyperventilating, close to passing out, so I just wanted to help keep her together until she got to the hospital.
From the school, they took me down to Sunnybrook. And we waited and we waited. Didn't get to see him. Didn't identify him. What was that?
You never went in that day?
No, we sat in a boardroom waiting for I don't know what.
Until finally the horrible news. Jordan has died. The first student shot and killed inside a Toronto school.
Coming up, with a gunman on the loose, police must try and piece together Jordan's final moments. 15-year-old Jordan Manners has become the first student shot and killed inside a Toronto school. Now back to Crime Beat's Catherine McDonald with the legacy of Jordan Manners.
One of their classmates has just been shot and killed. The killer, or killers, have fled. The school lockdown is over, but rumors are now swirling, and students are scared.
I think they were shouting at each other.
Some students will only talk if we promise to hide their identities.
A fight began. People started fighting. Then over the fireworks, they went inside the school, and yeah, someone got shot.
The people who do know are keeping their mouths shut for their own safety. They don't want to tell people, and then for that reason, they're going to get shot.
There are conflicting stories, but a scenario of what happened is beginning to emerge. Students report hearing the sound of firecrackers go off outside their classroom window. They say they looked out the window and saw a student collapse on the schoolyard and then stumble through the main doors. They say they were told that same student dropped down behind a doorway at the bottom of the stairs near the school pool on the school's main floor. But why Jordan? Was he targeted? Did he know his killer?
I know he was always like happy and like he always was joyful and he wasn't rude, he wasn't anything.
Were you worried about the group?
No, I wasn't worried about nothing with Jordan.
Jordan's older brother Calvin tells me he had always tried to guide his little brother in the right direction.
Don't get yourself in trouble with the law.
So for him to be the victim of a shooting,
it's harsh.
The next day, I meet Jordan's mother, Lorraine. She's numb and unable to understand why anyone would kill her youngest child.
Jordan was everything that I lived for. Jordan, I love all of my kids, but Jordan had something. Jordan had something. He was a great kid. He was great. You know, if he was a bad child, I'd tell you that, but he wasn't. He was a great kid. He was sweet, cute. Everybody loved Jordan. Jordan was Jordan. He was everybody's child. At any one time, someone would pick him up and they would take him away and they were with him. He was not needed for anything or wanted for anything. It was good.
Jordan's grade school teacher agrees.
Was a good student. You know, I mean, he was like any other teenager that's gonna at times push the boundaries, but just love the kid. The kid was witty, the kid was bright.
Devon Jones taught Jordan in junior high. He remembers how invested Lorraine was in her son's education.
She was a phone call away.
And she had her hands on the pulse of what was going on with Jordan.
Very hands-on. Like I would say, hey, there are days that she would spend the morning with me in my classroom, sit in my classroom with Jordan. So like,
Because she wanted to keep him out of trouble.
Of course, it wasn't a mother that was removed from this or was an absentee mother. No, she was very much so involved.
Devon also thought C.W. Jeffries would be a good fit for Jordan.
Jordan was very creative, he was very artistic. The school, CW, still has a great art program, and we figured that Jordan would flourish in that environment.
I have something to show you.
Jordan's one true love was art.
My Stockings book. That's what he loves, it's basketball.
An art book that Lorraine has saved to this day. The police initially appear to have few clues, but Jordan's mother questions their strategy during those early days of the investigation.
When did police come and talk to you? When did you find out what was going on? Because I'm sure you're like...
I didn't speak to any police at all.
Until when?
I didn't speak to any police.
Because we spoke to police, I think, that day.
You guys did.
They never came to see you in the hospital?
They were there, but they didn't speak to us. They didn't speak to me. They didn't come to the house to do an investigation to find out anything. Nope. They did not. No one was listening.
Superintendent Michael Barsky, one of the lead detectives on the case. He was there during those early days of the investigation that Lorraine is describing.
Early on in the investigation, we spoke to a cousin of Jordan, and we spoke to the brother of Jordan. Two were available to us on the scene, which made it far easier for us to access them, obviously. But again, the mother of this young man has questions, wants answers, deserves them. But in retrospect, perhaps one of those early on things should have and could have been a face-to-face with the family. When you don't have answers to provide a family, it's a terrible conversation to be able to be part of, because we want to be able to provide the right, accurate information.
I always hear about the notification of the family, especially as someone who's been doing this now 25 years. I always know we have to be very careful before we go with a name, because we don't want to be the ones to tell the next of kin. Is there now protocols about going to speak with family at their home, like the mother in particular or the father?
And certainly in any case, in homicides in particular, we absolutely do. But you point out a very valid piece to that. You know, positive identification of the individual is paramount as well. You know, we would never want to knock on the wrong door. And so as we're balancing all of the moving pieces, the people that want to speak to the police, the crime scene, the clearing of the scene, the managing of all of the outcry from family and friends who wanted answers as to where their loved ones were, all of those things very quickly consumed 6 or 8 hours. In a different scenario, in a different type of investigation, perhaps in the first hour we could be at the doorstep of the family. That wasn't the case here. I won't make any excuses as to why we weren't able to speak with Mom early. Certainly it's something that we reflect upon and ask that question for the next case.
As police work hard to track down Jordan's killer, friends and family gathered for a candlelight vigil on the front lawn of C.W. Jeffries.
It's just hard for me because, like, someone that I knew closely just disappeared. Like, I can't believe what kind of person would do this.
Hundreds come out to show their support and to join Lorraine in demanding justice.
We don't want anybody else to get hurt, not even the person who created all of this turmoil.
Even Toronto's mayor joins in, speaking out against gun violence.
It's time for us to say we're not going to put up with it anymore.
It's within these first 12 hours of Jordan being shot that a key witness comes forward to police, pointing the finger at 2 men. Jordan's family urges the suspects to surrender.
I've lost my life, okay? You're out there, okay? And what you got coming to you is gonna be worse than what you gave my son. And that ain't no threat.
Then, the break police are hoping for.
Witnesses tell Global News the raids began early this morning.
We're inside sleeping. Next thing I know, I just hear the door tearing down. It was just horrible.
Police officers along with ETF charged into a home in North York, as well as an apartment inside this nearby building and 2 residences inside this housing complex. When it was over, 2 people were held in custody.
Who are these men? Did they kill Jordan?
Coming up, do police have the right people in custody? Police have raided homes and arrested 2 men in connection to the shooting death of Toronto teen Jordan Manners. We now return to the legacy of Jordan Manners with reporter Catherine McDonald, who, back in 2007, was there on the ground covering this developing story.
At the house where the first suspect was arrested Sunday, Marcia Campbell says police have made a terrible mistake.
I think they have the wrong persons. And I believe the killer is still out there running around.
Media reports at the time described Marcia Campbell as being a friend of the accused, where he had spent the night. She says the accused, who was by Jordan's side when he died, was questioned by police Wednesday night. He even went to the barbecue with the victim's family over the weekend to pay his respects.
They told me that they didn't have evidence on him, so they have evidence now, so that's why they come.
The second accused, who turned himself in last night after police released his photo, calling him armed and dangerous, lives in this high-rise building in the Jane and Finch neighborhood. Those who know him say he has a newborn baby and say he wasn't hiding from police. They arrested 2 young men, right?
Yeah.
Had you told them anything yet at that point?
We kept trying to tell them from what we heard, did it. They weren't listening.
So you had been hearing stuff. What do you think happened?
They said he was shot. People tell me that he was in the gym playing basketball, and they called him from the gym to come to the bathroom, and he went, and that's when whatever happened.
So these 2 young men were arrested, and from the beginning you didn't feel they were the right people?
No.
The accused are only teenagers, but not students at the same school. They are charged with the first-degree murder of Jordan Manners.
All I can say is that the family is very upset and shocked by his arrest. We really have no details at this time, and the family is praying for their son, and they send out their condolences to the family of Mr. Manners.
You were able to speak with your son today?
I watch at the courthouse as the mothers of these 2 teens try to avoid the swarm of media following this high-profile case. Minutes earlier, this mother fought back tears as her son and another 17-year-old who can't be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act made their first court appearance. Finally, the police are talking. The head of the homicide squad tells us that weapons have been recovered, but a motive is still unknown. Police also thank the witnesses who broke the so-called code of silence by coming forward.
This is one more example of the community getting together, being courageous, and stepping up to the plate, I believe is one of the terms I've heard used or read about in the media. They're doing that.
I just wanted to know why. Why? Why did the hall monitor open that door and let those boys in? What were they doing in the school when they should not have been at the school? So if they got into the school with the gun, who helped them bring in the gun?
The day before Lorraine is to bury her son, she holds a news conference.
Maybe they'll have to bury me too. I don't know. Gotta be honest, is what I'm feeling. I'm just asking for all your support. Please don't let my son die in vain.
There's a couple of tragedies here. There are now 2 young people that are behind bars. A lot of these issues existed before those 17-year-olds were born. That's been continuing. So someone needs to look at the root cause rather than, putting this all behind us next week.
Lorraine is asking for two things: an inquest into the circumstances surrounding her son's death, and a provincial youth commissioner to help solve the crisis of gun violence.
Make it right for my nephew, make it right for my sister, make it right for his brother and his sisters, make it right for the community in which they live.
I'm ashamed of myself that it took this happening for me to kick myself and say, wake up. And I'm now going to kick everybody and say, wake up.
As Lorraine fights to ensure that Jordan did not die in vain, she still needs to bury her son. It's a heartbreaking goodbye.
Up next, exposing the truth when it comes to violence in schools, and a controversial move by the school board. Jordan's mother doesn't want her son to have died in vain. It's the first time a student was shot and killed inside a Toronto school. She's demanding an inquest into his murder and a hard look at the issue of gun violence. Now back to Catherine McDonald with the legacy of Jordan Manners.
As investigators prepare for the trial, the school board hires human rights lawyer Julian Faulkner to lead a school safety review in connection to Jordan's death.
I feel terrible for Jordan's family and what they had to go through. But it gets broader and bigger. This notion that somehow the schools were sort of hermetically protected against the violence outside the walls was, of course, folly. It was some artificial sense of security, a bubble that had finally been burst. And it was burst in 2007 when that 15-year-old lay on the floor.
Global news sources say a code of silence exists among top brass of the Toronto District School Board, a don't tell policy when it comes to reporting school violence aimed at protecting administrators.
It was fascinating, the level of resistance. And what that told you, of course, is that the keep a lid on it mentality was operating full force, and that people were extremely reticent to tell the truth. The resistance reached the stage where literally we were no longer funded.
But you continued on because
Absolutely.
you wanted to get the truth.
We finished our report. The report speaks for itself.
A hug and a whispered "I'm sorry" from the report's author, the only person Lorraine Small says has told her the truth.
But these are problems that find themselves in different parts of the city, black, white, purple, different colors. When our panel discovered guns in different parts, different schools, away from vulnerable communities, discovering school violence away from vulnerable communities, that was information we weren't supposed to uncover. But what I also saw was that people had enough, and issues around what was then called the Safe School culture. This Safe Schools Act that was a product of the Conservative government of the 90s, still operated as a specter over the system. And by that I mean the suspension of kids in droves. Literally using this notion of discipline through suspension and kicking them out of a system in order to try to make them better was a philosophy that had embittered countless groups of marginalized parents, community members, and so, not surprisingly, our schools are a microcosm of the rest of society, and you could see the division in the system. You could see the haves and the have-nots. We literally walked into a school where we discovered that a sexual assault of a young, racialized youth had taken place, a serious sexual assault, and it had been covered up by school officials. So that you had two solitudes. You had two solitudes of the students set up for success, and the students set up for failure, and those two solitudes expanded outwards.
There will be change as a result of your son.
And in front of everyone here, I have your promise for that.
I have promised for that in front of everyone here.
One of these changes is putting police officers in some Toronto schools. They're called School Resource Officers, or SROs. Jordan's mom strongly supports this move.
Having the police in there, I figure maybe this might help it not happen again. A child might feel the way and could go and talk to the police, and knowing that the police is there, they feel more safe.
And these resource officers, I remember talking when they were being done away with, to students saying, like, Officer Smith,
some of them made
he was like my dad.
Yeah, some of them made relationships with them, yeah.
So what was I know you made all these recommendations. In the end, they brought about the SROs. Was that something you had recommended?
No. There are different trust levels in police. For some, a police officer in the hallways, it enhances a feeling of safety and well-being. And if the officer does good work, like, you don't have to have an officer walking around with weapons to do this properly, right? The officer can be doing good work and be part of a healthy environment in school. The opposite can also be true based on which communities we're talking about their policing. You know, parents in vulnerable communities who see police officers and recognize that officer is the one that was in an altercation with their son. So we specifically did not make a recommendation that they be in the schools. We said in our interim report, this is an issue that we're flagging. We think the conversations need to continue with the police services. At the time,
Resource officers were controversial from the start. They were assigned to certain schools that tended to be in poorer neighborhoods with more racialized students.
So what did you think when the whole Black Lives Matter got involved and said, this is, you know, you're profiling here, and in the end they got done away with? And I can tell you, Lorraine Small's not happy about it, because she felt that was the legacy of her son.
there is no way I can soften the blow for her. There's no words I could use given what she's been through and the loss she's faced. I do not believe that Black Lives Matter determined this issue. I believe the inability of the police, along with school administrators, to adjust to circumstances set this up for failure. You can't just drop uniformed police officers in schools and say, go.
I have no issues with police being in certain schools, but I'll say, however, that cannot be the panacea. That cannot be the solution, right? The school that I'm standing in today, we have a guidance counselor in this building half day a week. Think about that for a second. How about additional people, additional resources?
As the years passed, Lorraine found ways of keeping her son's memory alive. All the while, she waited. In 2010, 3 years after Jordan was shot, the trial finally gets underway. The gun never found. All we know is that Jordan died from a single gunshot wound to the chest.
The accused gunmen, only teenagers, pleading not guilty. They are 17 and cannot be identified.
Lorraine, any thoughts before you go in on what you're going to witness today?
The prosecution argues that Jordan was walking with the two accused when a gun was drawn, pointed to his chest, and fired. They allege the motive was robbery of a gold chain, a cell phone, and a wallet. Crown attorneys have witnesses place both of the accused in the school at the time of the shooting. One witness says she saw JW drag Jordan down the stairs like a rag doll before robbing him and leaving him to die. And the gym teacher testifies he saw one of the men standing over Jordan, watching as the teen died. But defense lawyers counter with their own version of events, a much different story. They argue the shooting was an accident, that Jordan was fascinated with firearms, that he was looking at a gun in the boys' washroom when it accidentally went off and hit himself in the chest.
They try to make it look like he was in some gang or something.
Do you think Jordan's death had anything to do with a gang?
Jordan was not in any gang.
But do you think the kids that, or whoever did this was involved with a gang?
I don't know. I don't know. All I know is he's dead.
For Jordan's mom, the trial is grueling. Every day listening to graphic details.
Pain. Pain and just reliving it all over again. It's like I'm burying my son again.
But not all the facts are shared with the jury.
What the jury didn't hear during this trial is that a small amount of gun residue was found on JW's hands 7 hours after the shooting. It was not admissible because his rights weren't read at the time. The gun used to kill Jordan Manners was never found.
Then, a stunning turn of events. 2 key witnesses say they lied and recant their testimonies.
The way that came out of her on night 1, she could win an Academy Award if that was an act.
It's what the lead investigator called a hijacking of the court process. But the Crown says YM only claimed to lie in her statement out of fear of retaliation, leaving the jury to decide whether YM was actually lying or telling the truth.
It's a hung jury. The judge declares a mistrial.
A devastating outcome for a mother who prayed justice would be delivered in her child's murder.
The young accused, who were hoping for acquittals, are also unhappy with the outcome.
I'd like to say to you guys, what are you guys talking to me for? Both sides of the family are frustrated. We kind of want justice for both sides, whatever that might be.
We're very disappointed. We were expecting an acquittal. We know the jury took 4 days to deliberate, but this matter has taken 3 years to get to trial and 2.5 months of evidence. So we're extremely upset as none of the parties can move on.
I mean, it tells us that this is a very difficult case. It carries a lot of passion. I think that when you're looking at a jury that's been out since Tuesday, it shows that in many respects this jury grappled a lot with many issues.
It would be another year before the second trial, and Lorraine forced to do it all over again.
Coming up, Jordan's family prays that this time the jury will be able to make up its mind. But will it be the verdict they're hoping for? For 4 years, Lorraine has been grieving the loss of her son, 15-year-old Jordan Manners. 2 young men, known only as JW and CD, are charged with first-degree murder. Their first trial ended in a mistrial. They now await their fate for a second time. We now return to Crime Beat's Catherine McDonald with the conclusion of the legacy of Jordan Manners.
Get your cameras out of my bloody face!
Whoever did it, they know God looking at them, and God will judge them when the time is right.
It's not the verdict Jordan's family is hoping for. After 4 years and 2 trials, including a mistrial, a jury finds the 2 men accused of fatally shooting 15-year-old Jordan Manners not guilty of first-degree murder.
We respect the verdict of the jury, and our hearts go out to the Manners family, in particular Jordan's mother.
JW and CD are now free men. To this day, Jordan's shooting remains a mystery. His mother no closer to learning the truth.
2 trials later and still the same results? Nothing.
How did that make you feel that it was reported that people didn't want to come forward?
There was one particular young lady, the one that called me. She knew what happened.
Did she go to police?
No, she didn't. And she's supposed to be a family friend. That's the irony of it all.
So when you hear police...
When you're watching, you know who you are. You got kids too. Karma is a very patient lady. She's my friend. She'll come knocking.
And who's that message for?
She knows who she is.
This is the witness who never came forward.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So that must have been very difficult knowing that...
It still is difficult.
knowing that someone knows and they never went to police. You think that person could still do the right thing?
After 13 years? This is the last time we, 2017, had everyone sign this after we came back from the cemetery. We were right at the creek at Pioneer Village. This is the paper that they use in Pioneer Village days. So there used to be a lot of garter snake coming into the yards and into my neighbor's house and stuff like that. And he was the one that they called to pick up the snakes. He loved the creek. Loved being in the creek, exploring. He loved it. This shirt.
Jordan's mother has since moved away from the creek and the area around Toronto's Pioneer Village. But the daily reminders are still tough. She often returns to visit the memorial created to honor her son. Until one day, she gets a surprise.
I'm looking for my son's tree that the school board planted for him, and I'm saying, like, what happened? And I don't see the tree.
It's another betrayal for a mother who is still grieving. Part of the problem is that few staff are left from when Jordan was a student there. As for the plaque,
there was a plaque some time ago, but I don't know why, but that plaque is missing and has been for some time.
The school board maintains the tree was moved about 20 meters during the construction of the playground last summer. But Lorraine Small does not believe the tree she was shown is Jordan's tree.
I don't believe that's the tree.
1 week later, the school board admits that the original tree was in fact removed altogether.
We are here to remember and memorialize Jordan Manners.
Today, a rededication ceremony outside the school where Jordan was an elementary student.
We remember Jordan. We hurt for what happened to Jordan.
Jordan's family presented with a new tree, a new plaque, and a bench to sit on when they come visit. His mother relieved it's been replaced and grateful to Global News.
It would have been basically swept under. Would have been swept under the rug.
I'm told there are literally hundreds of memorials like this one across the TDSB. The board says as a result of this mistake, they've now implemented new procedures to ensure this never happens again. The new system ensures every memorial tree and plaque is logged on the board's site plans and has to be checked by the principal and facilities staff regularly.
It never gets easy. People say to move on. It's easy for everyone to say to move on. But I just can't.
Do you see anything being done differently now? Do you think schools are safer now?
I think people are more able to engage over the issues. They're more able to talk about the issues, and I feel proud that we identified the issues. I know that's a weaselly answer, but the idea that, quote, schools are safer now, that's just pie in the sky. I can't even answer that with a straight face. What is clear is that I think we form part of a very important conversation. And I know that we're still part of that conversation because, to my dismay, I still get calls. I think that's a bit sad. I think that a report that is 12 years old shouldn't be that important anymore. Somebody should have taken the work to another level, and we should have been rendered obsolete quite a long time ago.
Post-Jordan, there's been a couple hundred homicides of school-age kids. So there's something fundamentally wrong in particular communities. No child is born to shoot guns. I mean, we can say, let's get handguns off the streets. I mean, that's a complete misnomer. It's nonsense. Yeah, obviously, you have to get handguns off the street, but you have to look at the social conditions that's incubating this phenomenon. You know, it's more complex. It's more dynamic. It's tough. It's tough, but it's an impending crisis.
So it's funny because we talked about don't let my, how your son, you didn't want his death to be in vain. In fact, at a news conference, you said that. You said, don't let my son die in vain.
Mm-hmm. And he did, because like I said, for a while it worked, and then they took the resource officers out of the school, so. Jordan.
So it's painful that you've worked so hard to get these in, to do something, to bring change, and then in the end it all went away. So how do you cope with that? Knowing that this justice has never been served, here we are 13 years later.
Grace of God. He's the one that's been keeping me going. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of crying. There's a lot of flashbacks, memories. There are people out there in these so-called groups that says, oh, we'll be there for you, we'll check in on you, and none of that happened. None of that happened. So, at the time it was good for everybody, for the cameras to see what, for them to say this and say that. Who's been here? Who's been here? Catherine. Catherine. If I called you, you call me.
How could I not be there for you? You're a lovely woman who I met in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
And I now am a mother myself. And even at the time without children, I felt your pain.
Thank you.
And you're the kind of mother I want to be. A loving, supportive mother who has raised a great family.
I thought I did.
Look at your kids.
Yeah, pain sometimes, but I love them.
How do you remember Jordan today?
How do I remember him today? What would he be like? How many kids he might have had? Would he still be at home? Or would he be with his sister? I just miss him. Yes. Those nights when you need somebody just to say that one thing, and he was that. Say that one thing and change me.
He really got you, right? He really got his mom.
Yeah, he did. Still do.
How do you feel close to him now? Do you remember him? Do you ever talk to him? I know you said you go to the grave.
All the time I do.
Tell me what you do.
All the time I do. I just talk to him. Just let him know that I miss him, and I love him, and certain noise sometimes we hear, and just say, okay, Jordan, we know you're here.
You feel him around you?
Yeah. He's not here in body, but he's in spirit.
To this day, Jordan Manor's shooting remains unsolved, and the problem of gun violence has not gone away. Kids Jordan's age are still being killed by guns. A solution is desperately needed. All the while, Jordan's mother continues to hope that her son did not die in vain. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
For more on this story and other high-profile Canadian cases, check out Crime Beat Podcast. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.